Okay, we got some choke cherries. We got 30 pounds of choke cherries, so we got 15 pounds here and 15 pounds here. That's about 3 pounds per gallon. We're going to do 2 5-gallon batches. So we're going to put some water on these and we'll get them going. Okay, so I've added about 2 gallons of water to each pot. Just enough to cover up the choke cherries. And we've turned the stove on and we're letting it come up to a temperature of 160 degrees. So we'll just let it go until then. Okay, so we've got them up to temperature now, about 160, 170 degrees. So I'm taking a potato masher now that the fruit is softened up and just kind of mashing it up to get some of the juice out of it. We'll do that, and then we'll run it through a strainer, and then we'll put it back, put the juice back on, and we'll add the sugar to it. So when we get to the straining process, I'll cam up and show you guys that part. Okay, so we've got the sieve all set up, and we got our choke cherries that are all sterilized, and we mashed them down. So now we take some of the choke cherries and we put them in here like this, and it'll strain the juice through. Do a couple cups of that. Then we take our long rod here and we smash them down and stir it around. Kind of hard to do one-handed, but just so you get the idea. You run this around the edges and it keeps on juicing them. So now that I have two hands on here, you can run it around like this, see? And it smashes up the pulp and juices the berries. You just keep doing it until no more juice is coming out. Kind of an old-fashioned press, really. Just you hand do it. And then grab you here. And then as you can see, all the berries are crushed and stuff, and we'll just dump that into the trash, and we'll just keep repeating that process to get the juice down in the bottom. Okay, in the meantime, I've got a Monachie yeast going in on the stir plate here. And then over here for the other batch, I've got a Premier Cuvée going on the stir plate. So as I'm mashing these up, I started my yeast. Okay, just so you know a little bit about this process, the reason why we do this is because choke cherries have the seeds inside of them are fairly good sized, almost as big as the flesh, and they have some toxins in them that aren't good for you, and they're really bitter. So we don't want to run them through a blender or anything like that, or a juicer, because we don't want to have any of that inside of our wine. So this process here makes it so you don't get any of the seeds in there, because it's all done by hand. Alright, so we're done with the straining process, so now we're left with juice. And we're going to heat that juice back up in both batches, and we're going to add about 10 pounds of sugar to start with, and then we'll check our SG. So I'm going to let that heat up and measure out the sugar. Okay, so while that's heating up, we're going to sanitize our buckets. So I'll get those all sanitized up and ready to go, because once we get past this process, everything will have to be sanitized, like you know. Okay, so we've got our fermenting bucket all cleaned and ready to go. We're going to add a gallon of cold water to it just to cool off the juice when we pour it in here, and we'll need it to top up as well, so because there's only about two and a half gallons in there, so, and then we'll top it up to just a little above 5 gallons. So once that juice is done pasteurizing, we'll dump it down in there. Okay, I don't know if you can see the difference, but I've added sugar to this one, so it's a lot darker, clearer color. And then there's this one here that we haven't added sugar to. We're about at 140 degrees, so we're going to go ahead and dump in our sugar now and stir it in there. Bring it up to, sorry guys, we're fogging up. Bring it up to 160 degrees for about 10 minutes. And then we'll get it in our fermenter. Okay, as you can see, we're up to temperature, so we're gonna let her sit for about 10 minutes and then we'll start cooling it off. Okay, so our juice was heated up and I took the cold water and added it to the pan. Now we're gonna go ahead and dump it in here. It's still pretty warm, but we'll go ahead and dump it in here. And now we'll top it up to the 5 gallon mark with more cool water. Okay, so also with this chokecherry wine, I only had about 3 pounds of fruit per gallon. I like to have about 5. So I went and found some cherry concentrate. This one's apple cherry. I'm going to go ahead and add 3 cans of this into here just to boost up the fruit flavors. So we'll add that in there and then we'll add some cool water, top it up, get it ready to go. Okay, so now we've got our stir aerator on, our drill. We'll go ahead and mix that up real good and introduce some oxygen into it. At this point, we just want to get it mixed up good. And then we'll add some acid and a few things to it. First, we're going to get it all mixed up good and take a hydrometer reading. Okay, we're taking our hydrometer reading here. I don't know if you guys can see it or not, but we're right at about 1.09293 right in there. So it's going to be like between around 12.5%. So that's pretty good. I'll just leave it there. So now we just need to add the acid blend and a few things like that. Okay, so now we've got our juice all mixed up and ready to go. We're going to add 3 teaspoons of pectic enzyme. This will help break down the pectin in the fruit and help it clear. So we'll add 3 teaspoons of that in there. And then we want to balance out the acidity. And so I'm going to add a half a teaspoon per gallon. So, or half teaspoon per gallon. And we got about 6 gallons here, so we're going to do 3 teaspoons of acid blend as well. Okay, and then we'll get our drill and we'll stir that all up. Okay, and then the last thing is we're going to add some potassium metabisulfite. Some people use Camden tablets. I just find this easier so you don't have to crush it up or whatever. You only need a half a teaspoon for every 6 gallons of this. This is just to kill off any wild yeast or anything. Everything should be dead or we pasteurized it, but I don't like to take chances, so we'll just add that in there. You don't have to do this step. We'll stir it up and we will cover it with a towel overnight while our yeast is multiplying, getting ready to go. And it's still a little warm. It's still about 110 degrees. So we want it to cool back down. We want to get it down to about 90 degrees before we pitch the yeast. So we'll just cover it with the towel for tonight. And then tomorrow after work, we'll pitch the yeast. Okay, I got both batches sitting there on the floor in the buckets with the towel over them. We'll let them sit there until tomorrow after work. Okay, so it's been 24 hours. We're going to go ahead and aerate these, get some air in there before we introduce the yeast. Okay, so here we've got our yeast on the stir plate. So we'll go ahead and shut that off. And we'll bring it over. And we'll just dump the yeast down into our must here. Okay, so the next step is to add our sanitized lid and airlock. We'll go ahead and snap that on there. And we're good to go. As you can see, there's different kinds of airlocks. We got a one-piece airlock and a three-piece airlock here. It doesn't matter, just want to keep the oxygen out now. So we'll let it sit and ferment. Okay, here's our chokecherry. We've got a sanitized spoon. We're just going to go ahead and stir that up a little bit. I'm going to sanitize it in between each bucket. And we'll just stir it for the next couple days and let it ferment. This one seems like it's fermenting a little better than this one. This one is the one that we did a yeast starter. This is the one we pitched the dry yeast in. So this one looks like it's taking a bit longer. Okay, then we'll sanitize the bottom of the lids. And put them back on top. Okay, so here we are on day 3 of the chokecherry wine. As you can see, it's very active. It's really going at it. We're just going to take a sanitized spoon and stir it up. I just wanted to give you guys a little peek at what it was doing. Like I said, it's really active, so a few more days we'll just let it ferment, and then we'll come back when it's ready to be racked.